So welcome to this conversation. In this conversation, I'm going to be talking about the placement of Venus in Aries. Now, that means that the sign of Aries, at some degree in its 30-degree expression, it's going to have to produce the functional light of Venus. Now, right off the bat, this is a mismatch. Why? Because Venus rules Taurus, and Taurus is a two-dimensional sign. Aries, by its very nature, is a one-dimensional sign. And what that simply means is that the dimensions are experiences, so that in Aries you have 1 degree or 1 dimension of experience. In Taurus, you have 2 degrees or 2 dimensions of experience. These are not random things. And what typifies the one-dimensional nature of Aries, that its one-dimensional nature of its experience, is that it is the bursting forth, the coming forth, the first emanation of life. Now, when life comes into being, its primary function is to remain in being. It doesn't want to go back to the nothingness that is the cyclical process of Pisces to Aries. It wants to remain in beingness. And the proof of beingness is material sensation. Because Aries has no physical form. Most people don't realize this. That Aries is an intent. You can imagine it as some type of energy, but what is energy? Now, if you've been listening to the 5 principles of organized complexity, at some point you may have heard that energy is literally the waste product when structure collapses. When form is removed, the dissolution of form is the production of energy. Now, if you take what you call fossil fuels or chemical energy, those things are basically made up of some type of hydrocarbons. They are chemical bonds, and when they combust, they release heat energy. The same thing in the nuclear sphere. Nuclear energy really is the breaking of the strong nuclear force or the strong nuclear bond that holds the nucleus of an atom together, either through fission or fusion. But every time the structural constraints that pattern material existence, every time they collapse, energy is released. Anytime they form, they consume energy to form, but when they form a stable structure, there is a residue of energy that is released. And this is what typifies Einstein's E=mc². But the fact is that energy is some type of waste product. Okay? Now, when it comes to human psyche, obviously, because we're talking astrologically here, then what Aries wants to do is as soon as beingness comes into existence, it wants to remain in existence. And the only way to do that is to register in existence. That is to acquire structure and form. And so Aries only finds manifestation in Taurus. Prior to that, Aries is an idea. It's an intent. It's a notion. It's a potential for beingness, albeit very powerful, but it doesn't have any real grip on reality. It can easily disappear from reality, and nothing will ever know that it came or that it was here. So that within every major Aries placement is the urgent need to register existence as physical. That is, to take on form, to take on an identity, to demarcate yourself into something. Because you could so easily become the nothing that you came from. And this is the greatest fear of the Arian placement. This fear of becoming nothing. This is why, in essence, Venus in Aries is a passionate hunger for the material experiences of life. It simply cannot stand the suspense of a potential any longer. Because what Aries really is the energy that is released as a consequence of the material dissolution that occurred in the sign of Pisces. It wants to be something. It wants material experience. Any material experience will do, as long as such experiences prove to it that it is now a part of this world, and as such, it cannot be sent back to the nothing that it comes from. Okay? Now, the process of becoming a part of this world is the process of entanglement. Meaning that something needs to know that you are here, because when things know about each other, they become entangled in some way. For instance, when you learn a new concept, your mind cannot go back to the form it was in when you didn't know about the concept. There are actual chemical transformational changes in your brain that accommodate the new experience you have had. And every new experience is a type of self-awareness. So you can see that when it comes to the Aryan placement, it is self-awareness that needs to be entangled to something. It needs to latch on to something. And that is the nature of every Aryan placement. And that's why Aries is said to be ruled by this type of energy, this forceful kind of energy, typified by Mars. Okay? But the general idea is that the reason why Aries has the characteristics that it does is because it really doesn't have the time to dilly-dally about. Because it's not a thing yet. It has no form. It has no structure. You can literally say it's almost the same as nothing. Now, the Aryan knows that they are not nothing. But as long as nothing knows of you in any way, shape, or form, in quantum mechanics, this is called a measurement. And people think that measurements are things that only happen when somebody actually measures, takes a calibrating instrument and tries to measure the occurrence of something or the existence of something. That's not true. Interaction is the nature of measurement. So that the Aryan is under pressure to interact with material reality. It doesn't matter what the interaction is to the Aryan. The Aryan would prefer to interact in a nonsensical way as long as that nonsensical way takes a note of its existence. Because when something is noted as part of existence, it cannot go back to the nothing except it dies. And in order to die, you have to live. And that's what the Aryan is really concerned with. They want to live. This is the primary urgency within Aries. So that when Venus comes into Aries, this urgency basically explodes. Because what Aries really wants to do is to become Taurus. It wants to become the two-dimensional experience of Taurus. And that two dimensions is made up of pleasure or displeasure. It wants to embark on that journey. And it wants to do this as quickly as possible. Okay? That's really what it is. Aries fears dissolution more than anything else. It fears being nothing. This is what it fears the most. It is a readiness to accept any purpose whatsoever, any mission, any direction, as long as it pushes and establishes it in physical existence. So that an Aries which feels threatened with dissolution becomes a very promiscuous and hedonistic Aries. Why? Because that threat of returning back to the nothing makes them want to register any aspect of physical existence. And I've told you, the only way you know that you have a physical existence is because of your material senses. Those are the things that engage with reality. They are the vehicles by which you know that there is a reality. They're constantly informing you of a reality. So, like someone who was brought to a party and suddenly is told that, oh, you can't really attend, you have to leave. They make a dash for the food. They make a dash for the booze. They make a dash for all the sensations they can imagine. Because it is better for them to connect with something, meaning that when something or someone acknowledges that they are here, then you cannot send them back. In order to send them back, they have to live first. And that is the deal that they're looking for. To live, to be, to write a story, to carry their narrative with them. This is the primary urgency. Okay? It's a thirst for life. An Aries which feels threatened with dissolution also becomes very combative, highly combative. Because look, in the calculus of the Aryan, it is better to be combative with someone than to experience nothing at all. So depending on the type of dysfunctions determined by placements in Aries or determined by impairments in terms of aspects to Mars, or even the placement of Aries on which house it is, depending on a lot of things, the Aryan would prefer to feel something than to feel nothing. The very idea that the Aryan can feel nothing or can be dissolved into the ether, back into nothing, that is the stuff of nightmares for Aries. Okay? So if you really want to trigger them, come with no purpose whatsoever. Chart a course that leads to absolutely nowhere. Pretend as if there is no purpose to life. The moment you begin to do that, they are looking for the exit. Because these are their nightmares. These are the things that their nightmares are made of. They're made of such dissolutions. This tendency towards nothingness. Okay, you really don't want to do that to anybody with significant placements in Aries, because you trigger them, you send them gaga. They would rather fight with you, and it's not the fight per se. It's the fact that as long as you all are doing that, then you cannot negate their existence. Now, the Aries is not afraid of death. That's not what they're afraid of. They're afraid of a dissolution, which is a kind of disappearance. It's not really a disappearance because when people disappear, they are noticed. Their absence is noticed, so that when you disappear from existence, people carry memories of you and they begin to look for you. That's not what scares the Arian the most. What the Aries is scared about, what frightens them, is that they disappear in such a way that nothing remembers them. Nothing at all. So that for all intents and purposes, it's like they never were. This is the configuration of their deepest nightmare. And most of them don't know this. Why? Because we don't usually hear of such things. When something comes into existence, the only way it goes out of existence is when it dies. But in order to die, you must have lived in some way. Because when you eventually disappear, they're memories of you or of that thing. Okay? Now, what Aries wants is they want those memories. They want to be something. Okay? It's hard to overemphasize this type of thing. So Venus in Aries becomes a commitment to the constant reminder that sensation is evidence of life. It is not the sensation itself. It is a commitment to the journey that begins with the will to live, and no time can be wasted in the pursuit of this journey. Venus in Aries is an ever readiness to begin the narrative of life. That's it. Okay? Now, if you've listened to my other podcasts on Venus, you realize that Venus is a vector. And the vector is formulated by a conspiracy of all the material senses that you have. They are constantly sampling what you call physical existence, and they're making a judgment, but it's a very simplistic judgment. It's a two-dimensional judgment. Do I like this experience? Does it give me pleasure? Meaning, does it make me feel good? And the relationship to pleasure is not a coincidence. It's because pleasure is the first step in the route to orgasmic experience. That's really what it is. Okay? Because the orgasmic experience is the peak material pleasure experience in this reality when it comes to your senses, your sense organs, your body. But it starts somewhere, and it starts with the sense of taste. So that Venus itself can almost be associated with that sense of taste in entirety. So that you can imagine the Venus in Aries always eager to taste different things. What they're really eager to taste are different aspects of reality. It's a propulsion, because Venus in Aries is a propulsion system. It's a propulsion into the realm of materiality, into the realm of sensation. Now you would say, but the realm of sensation is a Taurian experience. Yes, but Aries is like an idea. It doesn't have any form. It doesn't have anything, so to speak. It wants to become something. And good luck trying to explain to someone whose 5 material senses are switched off or turned off. Good luck trying to explain to them the nature of physical reality. You might as well be describing something gibberish, something that doesn't make any sense, because the only way to know that you have a physical reality is through those senses. They are contact points or interfaces between what you consider to be an external reality and what you consider to be an internal reality. So that you can see that the whole aim of astrological natal chart synthesis is to blend these two realities together. But that process starts in Taurus. So that there is no difference between that internal reality and that external reality. They're a seamless whole. But your senses need to be able to tell you that. Now, the sense organs don't start off like that. In their two-dimensional nature as Taurus, they start off with hard boundaries. Their aim is to create these hard boundaries of what I like and what I don't like. And that goes on to create a dichotomy, sort of. Because if you want to realize what you like, then you must also realize the things that you don't like. And that is the natural boundary that creates and inflates the value system that the individual ultimately has. It is also what informs the individual of what they consider to be external reality as against the internal. So that it is Venus that creates this dichotomy, but it must blend this dichotomy before it leaves existence. So that we have a contrast now between the early stages or the early placement of Venus, when you have Venus in Aries or Venus in Taurus or thereabouts, right? Compared to the more advanced placements of Venus in Pisces or in Aquarius. Because by the time Venus gets into Pisces, it has blended these demarcations so that it retains the knowledge or awareness of what boundary conditions are, but it has abandoned them. Okay? So that within that Venus in Pisces personality, you have a more complex type of awareness because now it is made up of these two seemingly contradictory points or contradictory notions. But by the time Venus is in Aries, it doesn't have that contradiction, at least not yet. It is on a 100-meter sprint or dash towards Taurus. That's where it wants to go. So that Venus in Aries is the fierce urgency for material experience. So Venus is the behavioral aspect that seeks to resonate with the notion of harmony, beauty, similarity, symmetry, balance, refinement, and good taste. And these are the sensorial attributes that deliver the sense of what is pleasurable via the material senses. Since these senses are the interface with what we can consider to be material reality, then for all intents and purposes, they are material reality acquisition. They are your image of material reality. In other words, Venus is the very first narrative a self-aware being tells itself about the nature of its own physical existence. It is what reality feels like and is largely a barometer of whether the physical being is having a good time or not. If the physical being is not having a good time, it is simply because they experience reality as unpleasant. The natural tendency of the Venusian vector is to move away from displeasure towards pleasure, and so precipitates the need for dynamic adjustment via material assessment. And this material assessment is ongoing constantly. That's what it means to be physically self-aware. Venusian placements and aspects describe this assessment and dynamic adjustment. In Aries, Venus performs this assessment and dynamic adjustment with alacrity, speed, that is, passion, zest, and impulsion that is largely driven by the natural desire of Aries to initiate the narrative of life as a means of avoiding being dragged back into the nothing. So Venus in Aries is the lightning quick assessment and adjustment which seeks to maintain Venus in comfort, pleasure, and harmony. It really indicates the extent of willpower brought to bear on whatever Venus considers to be its most harmonious and pleasurable configuration. The trigger for action is often the Aryan perception of what is commonly known as dead ends. Now, for the Aryan, a dead end means a process that they cannot see where it is going. So it's not the fact that the process actually dead ends. It's the fact that the Aryan does not have the ability to see the progressive or the evolutionary nature of the process, and that simply just turns them off. Since dead ends cannot be perceived in entirety easily, the central lesson of Venus in Aries is the cultivation and acquisition of procedural patience. That is, the ability to truly understand the unfolding of reality in great detail before pursuing final determination. It is this which the Aryan Venus must come to learn and understand in order to truly enjoy the relational balance which leads to a deep, genuine, exciting, and lasting intimacy, which is something that the Aryan Venus fantasizes about. Now, the life lesson, the one major challenge of Venus in Aries, which you can describe as the life lesson in some sense, is that they get to learn how to see as much value in others as they want to see in themselves. The reason for this comes from the principal fact that the challenge of Aries is to establish the sensorial dichotomy of Taurus. That is, the value boundary problem of like versus dislike. That's the essence. So that's their life lesson. And it's always directed at the other. Okay, so some people may describe the Venus in Aries placement, or most Aries placements, as very self-centered. It's because the ability to see the other and relate with the other is not developed at all, because Aries is a one-dimensional nature of experience. That's really what it is. So the way that the Venusian Aries loves to be loved is via audacity. They like audacity. They love it. They feel the audacious need for conquest. They feel the audacious need to go after whatever it is that they consider that they like. And they expect that in return. Now, the problem is that such things don't last. But the Venusian Aryan is drawn to audacity, pioneering impulse, strength, this impulsive-like behavior. They're drawn to that. So they are turned on by audacious attempts at pleasure, audacious attempts at experience. So the one man who made it all, who conquered the whole world and delivered his dreams, that's a very compelling story to them. They're drawn to strength. They're drawn to courage. They're drawn to battle. They're drawn to confrontation because they perceive themselves to have or embody those qualities. Now, the Aryan does not understand that there is nothing like that in reality. Reality is an unfolding of a process that usually ebbs and flows. Now, the Aryan only understands the flows, They have no time or patience to understand the ebbs. So when the ebbs begin to serialize, they're gone. Because for them, this sends the signal that this might be a dead end. And the Arian does not want to be caught in a dead end. So the Venusian Aries is a serial pickup artist. And it doesn't matter whether it's male or female. They are serial pickup artists. They have no qualms going after whatever it is they consider they like. Once the excitement is there and the initiative is there, once the sense is acquired in terms of they come to the conclusion that this is what they like, they're gone. They do not have the time to think carefully about these types of audacious events. In fact, the turn on for them is the boldness of it all. So if you want to pick up a Venus in Aries man, be bold. If you want to pick up a Venus in Aries woman, be bold, be audacious. Be charming, but most especially be very passionate and realize that it probably wouldn't last longer than that passion. Now, because of this, when you are dating a Venus in Aries person, you don't want to string them along simply because they don't have the time. Now, they could have all the time in the world, but from their consciousness point of view, there is no time to wait for sensation because Venus in Aries is an awareness that life could end instantly. That's really what it is. So that the individual is constantly making calculations based on how much time is available for material sensation or waiting for material sensation. In that calculus, they don't have that type of time, even though there's a long time available to them in their life. Why? Because Venus in Aries is just a single placement. But Venus in Aries is an awareness that life could disappear. It could all end in an instant. Now you would wonder, why would somebody be born with this? It's because Venus in Pisces really is a dissolution into nothingness. That's the tendency, because the individual has evolved all the way to a 12-dimensional experience. That's the highest level in physical experience. After that comes the absolute nothing. Okay? Now, the fact that I say absolute nothing doesn't mean that there is no type of experience available. There is, but it's an orgasmic experience. The orgasmic experience that is the nature of paradise before we become physical beings. Okay? I have a podcast on that, but it's not quite ready yet. But this is the core agenda of the Arian sign, is that when it comes into this reality, it is coming because it is suddenly an awakening. It is an awakening from the nothingness. And it is constantly aware of that nothingness. Now, I want you to understand how this sits in the human mind, such that within the Arian personality, there is a vastness of great unknown, which the Arian cannot process. They don't know what it is, but they sit on the very edge of that, thrusting into a new type of reality. So that the individual within their psyche, they're in a hurry because they feel as if they might be pulled back into that nothingness at any minute or any second. So they're in a hurry to get everything done. And the thing they're really in a hurry to do is to experience reality. So they don't have the time to wait around playing elaborate games when it comes to the nature of material experience. No, they want it now. You're going to do it now. If you're going to plan anything regarding that, it has to be now. All right. Now, the downside of this is that the Venus in Aries personality spends a lot of time igniting many fires. They're hardly ever around to see what becomes of those fires because the igniting of the fire is just the beginning of the story. The story is 12 houses long and 12 signs long. Okay? It's a whole human life. But the Arian is really not interested in the time available for all of that. They're more interested in the cardinality of it all. If I start many fires, then there are chances that many more things will remember me in this life. And so in that way, the Venus in Aries is able to assuage that deep fear which they have of being pulled back into nothing. Okay? So that Venus in Aries can literally be described as the awareness of nothing. Now, it's not a thing that can sit within a physical being. You cannot have that awareness inside you. I mean, nothing even has a word. It has a word. So as long as we call nothing, nothing, it's not really nothing. It's something. Because we have something which we use to describe it. That's not how the Venus in Aries feels nothing. They feel it for what it really is. An indescribable void. It's not even a void because we can attach a word to the term void. It's an indescribable That's really what it is. And they're afraid of that. You can imagine it as a reality system that is totally unpatterned. And the reason for that is not because we as human beings come from a nothing per se. It's because the type of orgasmic reality that is paradise that we come from is completely wiped from the mind of Aries. So that in Aries you find the deepest tabula rasa. And tabula rasa simply is a term that describes a type of brain wipe or consciousness wipe. So that what the Arian is really suffering from is an absolute lack of memory. Why? Because they are now in a new experience, and in order to transition into that new experience, they have to let go of something. They had to let go of that orgasmic experience, that paradise, and to begin the journey. Now, because they no longer remember what that paradise really is, they are clawing, fighting, and struggling to remain in this reality. That's really what it is. And this condition sets the stage for the Venus in Aries personality to go about shopping for material experience. It's literally shopping because, it's like having a laundry list of things you have to do, or like a bucket list of things you have to experience. So you find them on the move. Now, if you want to drive them crazy, take them and lock them in a room and restrain them from being able to move. You just drive them insane, because that defeats the very aim of their placement. They're here to move, and they're here really to begin the story, a journey. The journey itself is a narrative. So Venus in Aries really is here to write a story. And because it's a potential, Aries is a potential that doesn't really have a direction per se. Now, in order to understand where the theme of that Aries and where that energy or that potential is being directed towards, you need to look at the placement of Mars in your natal chart. That's what tells you the theme of that potential, where that potential is pulsating into, or where it is headed, or what the energy is available for. Because the energy that Aries carries is the energy to begin realities. So that if you really want to change your life, you cannot change your life without Aries. Aries is where you begin the process of changing your reality. So when you look at your natal chart, you look at the house that Aries is sitting on the cusp of, that's where you always begin things anew. That's really what it is. That's your approach to starting anything new. It is also your approach to that potential when you want to acquire the knowledge of life. Because life itself is a narrative, because life is different pathways in the universal mind. But it has to start from somewhere. And the Arian is aware of this. And that's why they're always on the move, trying to start different types of things. It is the tendency and the urge to start different types of stories. Now, things are not always rosy for the Venus in Aries. Why? Because it's so easy for things to go wrong. Especially because the Venus in Aries does not know how to process the complex evolutionary structure of narratives as they unfold in reality. And as a result of this, what you can call a fundamentalist idealism, the individual can be deceived. They are deceived by the unpredictable turn of events. And so unscrupulous people can actually weave these types of fundamentalist idealism in the turn of events and use that to deceive them. They are also capable of self-delusion, not in the Neptunian sense or the Piscean sense, but in their expectation values of reality. Because Venus in Aries, the one-dimensional experience, it really only has one concern. It is using a one-dimensional experience to create a two-dimensional vector. It's never easy because it's a recursion. So that the Arian is on a recursive journey. They really can't stop. Aries chases Venus, Venus chases Aries back. And it's a very cyclical process that really is the embodiment of a contradiction. So within the Venus in Aries, you have this fundamental contradiction. But that contradiction is the energy source for new life, for new realities, for starting new stories. So this is an individual that can always rewrite their story. They're always in some type of process of rewriting themselves. You think of a hard disk. Now, you can wipe off something from a hard disk and put some new content on it or some new information on it. But the hard disk is never really wiped away. There are many tools you can use to try to recover information that has supposedly been deleted. So what happens to the Venus in Aries over time is this accumulation of reality and a pseudo-reality on level 1, pseudo-reality on level 2, etc., all the way down. So that as the Venus in Aries evolves, they gather this conundrum of personal experiences. A lot of them. They don't know what to do with it, because in order to process all of that, you need Venus to evolve beyond Aries. So that the Venus in Aries personality gets wiser as they get older. The idea is that Venus begins to experience a higher dimensional space of awareness than Aries. Okay, so it learns what to do with the Venusian function, which it generates. It realizes that pleasure is a measure of self-value. But until that process is complete, the Venus in Aries can be one of the most hedonistic people you come across. The most combative people, okay? Because they do not see reality the way reality is. Reality is the need to instantiate a material experience. And that's all it is, okay? So if you stand in their way towards this, they will perceive you as some type of enemy. It may even go as far as them thinking that you are here to pull them back into the abyss, to destroy their life, or to disintegrate them, or to kill them. They have different interpretations for this. And their response to this type of thing is to either combat you or to flee. Most of them will flee. This is contradictory to the fact that most people think that Aries is always combative. Yes, immediately yes, but once that initial outburst is done, then they're gone. And they will overlay the experience with a new type of reality, which they start anew. So that these people are constantly in the habit of rewriting who they are. You know, imagine a computer that every time you start it up, it had to relearn what a startup is. That's exactly what it is. Now, from a financial point of view, Venus in Aries is ideally suited to industries where reality needs to be asserted over and over and over again. They're very suited to businesses requiring replenishment of some kind. So that you can imagine replenishment being different types of realities that are repackaged constantly so that no two realities are always the same. So you can imagine that as a reality system where something new is constantly being produced. Any type of enterprise that has this as a functional part of it, the Venus in Aries is ideally suited to it. The last thing the Venus in Aries personality wants to do is to be stuck in some type of humdrum situation where every day is the same as the last day. They're not built for that. And the moment that begins to happen, it triggers their deepest fears of being pulled back into the nothingness. Now, if you're dating someone with Venus in Aries, you have to understand this aspect of their psyche, that you are dating them for the moment. You cannot expect them to settle down into a humdrum existence with you until they're much older. So if you meet a Venus in Aries while they're still quite young, you don't really have a life partner at that stage. They require a higher degree of emotional awareness or a higher dimension of emotional awareness to ultimately come to the realization that they have reached a destination point in their lives. And even then, you still need to keep yourself very interesting. You must engage with reality in the way that they do, at least to that extent, so that the best type of compatible partner for the Venus in Aries is someone very similar. Someone with a matching energetic reaction to life. Okay? Someone who's ready for that adventurous, fire-starting nature, that cardinality. Because like I told you, the Venus in Aries is not afraid of death. What they're really afraid of is a dissolution. Okay? Now, Venus in Aries in itself connotes risk. Why? Because Aries really doesn't stop to think. It's not because it's in a hurry. I've explained to you what that means. It's because of the way that its mental experience is structured. Now, where Aries is really going is that Aries is making a dash, not just for Taurus. Aries is making a dash for conviction. That's really what it is. And it's making that dash because it wants to become Leo, the second fire sign in the natal chart. That's really what it is. And it has no time to waste because, like I said earlier, it perceives life as an urgent reaction. Now, in that relationship context, the Venus in Aries needs a reality that is constantly tumbling. You know, like you'll have clothes in a washing machine or in a tumble dryer. That's the reality, the way they experience it. That's how they process reality. Now, the added complexity is that intermittently you must bring out all the clothes in the dryer and change them and then start the process again. If you're going to deal with such people, you have to meet them on that level. Otherwise, the relationship is not possible. Most of the time, they are overlain with so many cardinal points, cardinal starting points, so many realities which they have triggered into existence that it's a mess in some sense. Not to them though. That's the way they experience reality. They understand reality that way, even though they cannot tell you precisely what that reality is made of in terms of how it is behaving. In some way, they can deal with the chaos of it all, as long as it keeps being interesting and keeps them moving. As long as there's a story to be created from the middle of it all. That's really what it is. So, high octane matches, that's what they're looking for, until they start becoming wiser. Then things begin to settle down. Now, the energetic aspect of the relationship will always need to be there, but the patterning of it all now changes. Okay? So that they can create a reality system where certain aspects of the reality are changing, and that's okay for them, rather than changing the whole reality periodically. Okay, which is what happens when the Venus in Aries hasn't really put their finger on the pulse of their own behavior. But when they settle down into a more mature type of experience, then they have a reality that is stable, but different aspects of that stability are constantly being updated, innovated, made anew, so to speak. Now, if they don't have this, then they will do that with the partner. They will throw up the tendency to try to change the partner over and over again. So they will prescribe your wardrobe for you this week, and next week they want you to throw all that out so they can replace it with something else. The same thing with meals, the same thing with holidays, vacations, whatever. They will constantly try to introduce that change, that cardinality. They'll come up with different types of ideas. Now, don't expect them to have solutions for these ideas when they're up and running, okay? They feel that their worth really is in generating these ideas. But seeing them through, that's for a different person. So that the idea of love is fantastic, because you will never meet a more passionate people than the Venus in Aries personality. But that passion is basically just on the surface of it all. It burns very hot and very bright initially, but there's no stamina to it after a few whatever, and then it's gone, because the Venus in Aries personality has not addressed the very context which brought them into existence, that tabula rasa. When they do, their reality system changes, because now they understand why they are the way they are. And that understanding leads to the entanglement that changes their personality. It broadens it out, matures it up, and then within that you have one of the most amazing partnerships that you can imagine.